All right, everyone, we are back once again for another Comedy Sports D&I Talks with your host, me, Luis Cortez, a longtime Comedy Sports LA player and longtime Comedy Sports Chicago player, now our Director of Diversity and Inclusion. One of the reasons that we started this show is essentially to allow our community and our audiences to meet ensemble members, hear their stories, hear how they've climbed through the improv communities here in Chicago and in other cities, but specifically also through Comedy Sports Chicago, so that we can stop repeating the mistakes of the past, start repeating the good moves of the present, and just build a better community, not just for ourselves, but for all audience members and all of our fans and anyone who sees something like this and goes, I think I could do that, because the answer is, of course you can, and we want you here for that. One of the people that I am talking to today, one of, I think, my longest Comedy Sports friends. We have been playing together and known each other for an extremely long time. Please welcome Kat Gotsick.
Hi, Luis.
Hi, Kat. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited that you're here. It has been a while since you and I have actually gotten to just kind of sit and chat. Usually
Yeah,
it's
that's
always work related.
exactly. Well, you know that we've known each other so long. When 2005,
Is
you
that
and
when
I
we
met.
met?
Yeah, 2005. You and I met in LA when I was doing like a 6 week sabbatical. And you were a squire at the high school league camp that I was guest teaching at.
It's so funny that you say that because literally as you started that story, it all rolled back into my head, and I went, "You were a counselor,
Yeah.
and I was a baby college student, or not even
And
college student, but college. Like I was part of the college team, so I was
yeah,
probably
right.
22, 23 at the
Yeah,
time. Well, 2005, I would have been
absolute baby.
I don't know when, yeah, 2024.
Yeah. No, it was
And you
great,
came
but
out
you
to
were still.
teach.
I was there to teach, and then I saw you at the tournament that championship that year, and
And 2005 was the year we hosted
yes,
in LA.
yes, yeah, it was great. I still remember the theater. I remember a game called Heckler that Greg Byrne played, and I can't
Greg Bird,
like.
there's a name I haven't said in a
I was
while.
gonna say I can't believe I pulled that out of my butt. I was like,
Good job. I think he ended up, after a few years, I think he moved to like New Mexico or Arizona and just started raising a family. I hope that he's still playing out there. Greg, if you're watching, look
I
me up.
Vern, give us a call. Look us up on Facebook. We both like you.
So we met out in LA, and then I came out to Chicago
A couple years
a
later,
couple years later because I decided to volunteer
at
for
the
the Chicago
CIF,
Improv Festival.
yeah,
And
and you
you were
stayed in
kind
my
enough,
house.
yeah, you were kind enough to let me crash at your place.
But that's the reason you and I like my earliest interactions with you are just kind of having like long opportunities for chats and like catch ups and
If I remember correctly, when I came out, you were in the middle of preparing for a trivia TV show.
yes, I that was the year of the VH1 World Series of Pop Culture.
Yeah, that's it. You were part of a team that made it pretty far. And I actually remember going out to lunch and quizzing you.
Yes.
Like you handed me like you got to ask me these questions. And I was like, "Okay." And it was all like, like Granny on the Beverly Hillbillies and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, that was an intense time, and that's all. It was a very friend of mine. I did not want to be embarrassed. I don't think we were.
No, not at all. I loved it. Okay, so
So,
for people who are not familiar with Kat Gotsick, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where your improv journey started?
so I grew up in Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, in the 70s and 80s, and my school didn't even have an auditorium. Like I had no theater experience at all until I got to college, where I went to college with Dave Gaudette, the owner of Comedy Sports Chicago. He and I both were went to Denison University.
At the same time?
Yeah, we sat next to each other at graduation. We didn't know each other well, but we both had G names, so
Gotsick and Godet, and you ended right next to each
we
other?
ended up right next to each other at graduation. And he was president of the school, so I knew him.
Of course it was.
I knew who he was. And it was a small enough school where everybody kind of knew everybody. But Denison had a uh, improv group, a short form improv group called Burpee CD, and Steve Carell was in Burpee CD. Rob Plord from Boom Chicago was in it. Alex Moffat was a Burpee, and it was really what comedy sports looks like is what Burpee looks like. Like, Dave started Comedy Sports Chicago, and so when I first came to a comedy sports show, even some of like the rough banter was the same stuff that they used in Burpee.
Awesome.
It was amazing, yeah. And so it was very familiar, and that was really cool for me. And I had every intention of auditioning for it because I really loved comedy and I wanted to do it, but somehow I got the audition time wrong, and I showed up and I got freaked out and was like, I guess the universe just doesn't want that for me. But you could only audition when you were a freshman, so I didn't audition that year, and I didn't so I couldn't be a Burpee. And I was very sad about it, but I went to I was kind of a Burpee groupie. I went to all the shows. And then when I graduated college, I went to Washington, D.C. for 10 years. And I was in a group that I think still exists, or at least it did a couple years ago, called WIT, Washington Improvisational Theater, which at the time was a theater sports franchise. And I did short form with them for a brief second, just a hot minute. And then there was a total drama when I was recruited out of that group by another member of the group who was leaving and taking 4 or 5 of us with him.
Oh.
And I know, which I'd been there maybe a couple of months and I didn't understand all the drama, but there was that followed us for a while, and we did sketch, which was what he really wanted to do. So I ended up doing sketch comedy in DC for a solid 8 or 9 years, and came to Chicago after that group broke up, thinking that I would give myself 2 years and I'd be playing the main stage at Second City, and another 2 years and I'd be on Saturday Night Live, and 21 years later, here I am.
Yeah. I think we all do that when we land here. It's all right. Here we go.
And I'm glad I know that's what we all do, but it was, so I dove in. I was much older than everybody else that was just starting out. I was 32, and almost everybody in my IO class was fresh out of college, and same with my Second City class. And there's good and there's bad in that, because having to be around people 10 years younger than you really keeps you young. It really does. That's one of the great things that I love about comedy sports, is that I'm constantly rejuvenated by these new waves of people that come in who are just youthful, and also falling in love with comedy sports. I get to do it over and over again, and that's really neat for me. But I did all of the programs. I did all the programs almost at once. I did IO, Comedy Sports, and Second City all at once, and then I did Annoyance right after that. And I was hired to Comedy Sports October of '99. Okay. Yes.
And we really have been playing about the exact same amount of time, because I started my high school league
16 or 17, right?
In 99.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
99 was my senior year of high school, and that's when I started on the high school league in LA. And then a couple years later, I was on the college team and have just been
How
doing
about
it
that?
ever since. So
Right.
yeah, we're at
Yeah.
what, 20, 22, 22, 23 years now?
That's crazy. That's so
Yeah, we
crazy.
really have been doing it the exact same amount of time.
Well, and which is something that's interesting because there's always there's two ages in the improv scene. There's your age, and then there's like your improv age. You can be very old in real age and very new in improv age,
Mhm.
or I could be much older than someone who's been doing improv a lot longer than I have. And like that's always like
Weird.
an interesting thing.
And
Um,
it was, and I get that, like that period of like hanging out with a younger group, because I did it through my 20s as I went from being in the high school league a few years later to teaching for the
yes,
high school league. So there I am in my, early to mid 20s, and everyone is 15 to 18. So it does do that thing where like it keeps me young, but I think it also kept me like dumb and irresponsible, just because all I was surrounded by high school kids all the time. Uh,
right. Well, and
because I
in
wasn't the
LA, that's
teacher, I was just like the cool guy who came in and taught improv. So
oh,
like
and LA's high school scene is so rich. It's so rich. It's
we had
amazing.
close to 100 schools. So
It's
I spent the better part of my 20s living in my car, just
yeah.
driving to these locations.
It's genuinely like I was in awe of it. Still am. I don't know how. Like I have no idea how. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's been a while. I don't know how they're doing. I hope they're still doing well.
I
Because at
hope
the
they
time,
do.
as we were doing it, like, our pride point was we are the largest high school improv program in the United States, and it's run by like 10 of us.
Right.
Sometimes I have to drive 4 hours to get to one of these schools for their 90-minute show.
Yeah, wow. Everything in LA is that far away from everything else.
Well, with the traffic,
Right,
it was
totally.
literally like you could leave at this time and only spend an hour and a half in the car, but then you got like 2, 3 hours to kill before your show, or spend 4 hours in the car and get there just in time. And it's just like, come on. This was like before, texting and
Right,
all
yeah.
this stuff, where it was just like, all
Wi-Fi.
right. When I used to teach at one of these schools, they had a $2 theater like 3 blocks away. So I would go down there early and just watch a $2 movie before my class.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Remember that, Luis?
Remember
Remember
that?
that in the
Yeah, remember
90s?
that?
The
So long
teacher,
ago.
the aughts.
So you started
I started
in
in
the actual
99.
ensemble in 99.
Correct. And I mean, there was no such thing as there were classes, but I think there were four people in my class, and there were and you didn't recruit out of my class. Like the ecosystem that we have now is light years ahead of the ecosystem that we had then. I was hired on a Tuesday, and I played all four shows that week.
Oh boy. Okay.
It was
Rough and tumble.
it was yeah, oh, it was. And I'd never played five things before, and I'd never like it was really honestly it was a truly trial by fire. Um and in my class, this is I love bragging about this. Kay Cannon and I were hired at the same time, who wrote the Pitch Perfect movies,
Of course.
and Tim Mason, who's the director of Work in Progress on Showtime, and Karen Gracci, who writes for TV. And
She was one of my teachers out in LA.
really, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
She was my level 3 teacher at
And I
IO
know
West, and
she's so
honestly,
cool.
like to this day, that still stands as the best class I ever took.
She's spectacular.
I
And
never got more out of the way that improv works, especially long form improv, than I did from Karen Gracci's class.
that was Rebecca Stone for me. Did you ever have Rebecca at Annoyance?
No.
That was where I think she's the best teacher I ever had on any subject ever. Um, but uh but yeah, so those were my contemporaries, and we all jumped right in. Tim had been doing he'd done comedy sports in Kansas City before he got there, but the rest of us were just super green. um yeah, and then through the 2000s, I really spent a lot of time doing all sorts of improv and uh, became a teacher and a director, which I love. I actually think I'm a better teacher and director than I am a improviser. And I love doing it. And I taught in the A through E program at Second City for many years, and I subbed in the conservatory, and I coached at the playground, and I was on the board at the playground theater for many years, and really just immersed myself in the whole improv culture. And there came a time where I was like, I either I'm gonna get famous or I'm gonna have a life. And I knew I wasn't going to get famous. So I pared everything away and I stayed where I landed where I felt most at home, which was at comedy sports. And I always knew that was where I would land. It is by far the most welcoming experience I had in any of the theaters that I went to. Um, and I still love I love volunteering at auditions because the auditions are such a positive atmosphere, and I like being a part of like making somebody be like they walk in and what do they expect, and they, even if they don't get hired, they walk out being like, oh, I mean, like it seems like fun here. Yeah, so that's, and then I've been doing you know increasingly less improv over time. I'm doing a lot more improv the last
I
couple
wouldn't say
years.
less. I think I always like to think of it more as like I'm just doing like I'm very specific as to the type of improv I want to do now. Like
I choose
I
my
don't need to, yeah, I don't need to
yes,
spray my attention across
yes,
8 teams.
correct,
It's like
correct.
I know where I want to focus on. I know what I want to master, so
Yeah.
I can do this now and not feel like I'm not a real improviser because I'm not on 1,000 teams.
Which was exactly what it was like when I first started. Like you
Yeah.
had to say yes to everything. There was much less opportunity for stage time. There was much less, certainly for women, there was much less opportunity for stage time. You had to put yourself out there every way you could possibly put yourself out there and hope that the right person saw you doing something good. But it's also was like that was just in the improv scene, but like I love Chicago because you can kind of get out of it what you put into it. Like if you decide you want to produce your own show or um, you want to start your own theater, like if you hustle and you do work, like you get out of it what you put into it.
Right.
So but you ain't gonna get on the Second City stage or a Herald team unless the right person sees you at the right time. So that's probably a little different now. I've been out of the IO Second City scene for a very long time now, 10
I
years
you know
ago.
I landed here in Chicago in 2016, and I essentially was just, I'd done years out in LA, but even after that long, it's still like Chicago's the Mecca. So I was like, I gotta go. I gotta.
Make it here, you'll make it.
Uh, but it was such a it was such a different world. I didn't expect the culture shock that I received, not just because it was the Midwest, which I had never lived in, but just the culture of, like you said, if you want to just put up a show, we'll just put up a show. Like you have an idea on Monday, you could have that up by Friday,
Yeah,
which was not a thing in LA. And I've mentioned that
right,
a couple times in these where it was like it has to have legs before it even gets off the ground. Can we make this a web series? Can we make this a commercial? Can we make this
right,
a podcast? Can we make this a movie? Like, what can we do with this aside
right.
from just improv? And it's like, no, it's just improv. And of course, boo, get out of here. Um,
Bit the crap out of
but
me.
but seeing uh, how people were attacking it when I landed, it was very much that feeling of like, oh boy, like I'm getting too old for this shit. But
That is mentally how I
yeah,
felt.
like,
Yeah.
is this what this is what the 21, 22 year olds are doing? And I don't know if I can keep up.
It was it's hard work. You got to want it.
So, as you were saying before, over the last, I want to say, probably 10 years, there's been a lot of movement in our industry in
Yeah.
a lot of different ways.
Yes.
And, here we come, the old
Art.
players,
Yeah.
the old farts, who there was definitely like certain things that as this was coming out, you start to go back in your head and you're just like, oh boy, I did not help that. And it it
Yeah.
it has been a very interesting few years.
Without a doubt. I mean, I think in one of your talks, I watched a talk and I forget who it was with, but you had like a moment that stopped you in your tracks where you're like, I'm not a leader. But then you realized it was probably because you'd never seen anyone who looked like you in a leadership role. And
I think I
I
was
had
talking
this,
to Jesse about that.
excuse me?
I think I was talking to Jesse
Yes,
Gomez about that.
no, because I didn't watch it with Jesse. I will though.
Well, then I've talked
Um,
a lot about it.
now spoiler, great. But I had the same thing with the first time someone came to me and said, I was very uncomfortable with what that person just did to me on stage. Um, at first I was like, I'm so sorry you feel bad. And then thinking about it, I was like, that's a really thin skin. And then I had the moment where I stopped in my tracks where I was like, wait a minute. I guess I didn't have to tolerate that. I could have complained just like this person's complaining. Why didn't I complain? And not only did I not complain, like I kind of walked into Chicago, understood that I was late to the game, looked around, assessed the situation, figured out the rules, and then I decided I wanted to play by those rules. And it really was a man's world. And I was you had to you played fast, you played dirty, you drove, you steamrollered, you like that's how you got noticed.
Yep.
That is like that was your path to success, was if you could keep up with them, rather than forcing them to deal with you in a different paradigm. And so when I realized that, oh, my paradigm's upside down, I was in control this entire time and didn't take it, didn't take control. Like I didn't steer anything in the right direction for the next generation. I didn't yeah, I mean, like I had the same thing where I was really like, oh, I wish I had, I don't know what the
Weird to think about it because I know where you're
yes.
going with that because I've had similar moments, thinking back to a lot of my old behaviors that a, a big chunk of them did come out of that sort of like, how does one fit in here? How does one
Yes.
become one of the cool kids here?
Yes.
You observe it, you watch it, and then you just do that.
And then
And
yeah.
then there were other behaviors that were coming out of just insecurities, the way people were treating me at the time. I was also in my 20s, dealt with a lot more, or was less, uh, what's I was more accepting about people's, not even accepting, but I would just kind of take it, people's
Mhm.
emasculation of me because of my size at the
Mhm.
time and my voice and everything. So there was a lot of emasculation in that way. So that led to me needing to prove what a man I was, which led to even worse behaviors. And all of this going unsupervised, unpoliced. I wasn't policing myself, others weren't policing me. I think back to a lot of these
Not
times.
only that, you were probably rewarded for it sometimes, right?
Not only was I
Yeah.
rewarded, but I definitely was not being like disciplined.
Yeah.
So it was just like no one's saying anything, so I guess this is okay.
Right.
So you
Yeah.
fall into that weird sort of place of like I could just as easily say, well, no one told me, so
Right.
you know. But it was also I can't just throw the blame out to other people. Like, if I was in my 20s, I was an adult and I
Yeah.
could have caught myself on a lot of these things. So, it was learning to take my share of the responsibility for the
Yes.
behavior that I allowed myself, but
Right.
also the behavior that was being allowed, not just from me, but from
Right.
everybody. And now here we are in this period where it's just like it's taking it all in. It's relearning what we thought
Yes.
we already knew.
Unlearning
Unlearning.
what we know was wrong now, what we know was should not have been acceptable, and relearning the relearning for me is easier. The relearning the relearning is really easy. I want what today is. I really do. I do not want women to have to deal with what I dealt with. I do not want them to have to resort to the things I did to succeed, right? But but yeah, I mean, like, the unlearning is the problem. And then on top of that, there are practical things, like there's the paradigm that you're constantly challenging, this paradigm that's really inbuilt. There are practical things like language and pronouns and um, uh, ladies and gentlemen, and things that are just I'm 20 years deep in those, and I have started to do them without thinking about them, and unlearning them requires me to be present all the time, every second. And
I,
every second I'm not present, I have like done something
yeah,
that probably upset someone, and that's upsetting to me.
I think a lot of that also it's not just being being present, but it was also just kind of like I have to come to terms with the fact that there were behaviors that I was okay with. So it was just like you're gonna have to deal with certain parts of yourself that aren't the most positive and aren't presenting you in the best light. And I think that's where a lot of people hit a wall because
Yeah, it's hard.
who wants to sit there and beat themselves up? But I had to push through that stuff because of like this position that I
Yeah.
wanted all of a sudden. And the thing that I always told people was I didn't, and I've said this before in these chats, which was like, I didn't take this job because I was an angel with a perfect track record. Like, if
Right.
anything, it was the exact opposite. It was because I knew how easy it is to lose yourself in these things when they are going unpoliced, both by yourself and everyone around you. You can get lost in it. In a vacuum, it's a bubble, and no one tells you anything, and yet no one has the wherewithal to tell you. You realize that outside of those glass doors, no one gives a shit about what's going on in here. And
Right.
to us, it was life.
Well, my girlfriends and I watched The Vow on HBO. Do you know what this is? The documentary about the Nexium cult.
No.
Well, there's this cult called Nexium, and and as they described getting into it, and everything they were talking about was actually like kind of positive. And you're like, oh my, that actually sounds like it would be productive, and that would, interesting. And then you got all the way in, and all of a sudden, like, your money was out the window, and then it was a sex cult, and then like it became very unacceptable. But my girlfriends and I were like, I think we were in an improv cult.
A little bit, yeah.
Yes, I mean, like, it didn't get that. It didn't certainly get to the point of like human trafficking like it did with this one, but you accepted behaviors that, looking back, you're like, how did I think that was okay?
The way our entire structure was set up, like, you think back to, like, now, like, you know, uh, not too long ago, we made the decision to start auditioning our teachers at Comedy Sports. And it was such a, like, wait, what? Because who have always been the teachers but the cool kids? Hey, you're good at this. You'd probably make a good teacher. It's like,
Right.
that's not necessarily true.
No,
Not at all.
no.
And so, or just like he's the real hot popular guy right now. Let's give him a class.
Right. Yeah. Or yeah, I mean, I took a class from like one of the most widely accepted best improvisers in Chicago and got zero out of it. That was a rude awakening for me. I was like, oh, it turns out that all the way that you improvise like this guy is just be this guy. No one else can do it. And that was actually that one of the things that I have learned as I've gotten older is that there is no every heart, every mind, every brain has to be caught one person at a time. Like, you can't say, oh, people should do this, or white people should do this, or women should do this, or students should do this. Like, you really have to come at each person exactly where they live and find how they learn. And, you don't succeed in every case, but you try. And that has been a really interesting I don't know if it's every like 50 somethings evolution, but it certainly has been mine. Like, there was a moment in time where I was like, I have to stop fighting to get everybody to do this and just deal with the person in front of me. um, and if everybody was doing that, you know I think we'd live in a different world, because you would have to deal with the person in front of you and not the opinions of all of their friends and not the opinions of every commenter on their Facebook page and stuff. So
Yeah, I think that's something that all of us just as people at some point come up on it. And I don't know if it's like, a part of being 50 something, but I think it is part of getting older and just knowing where you want your energy to go, where your effort
yes,
really lie, like what are the things that really want to work.
yeah,
Like we said, as we got older, we started dropping teams because we
yes,
realized this served its purpose, but I'm not really pulling anything from it anymore, so I don't need to keep doing it. And this, and same with you. Eventually, like I was cutting certain things out, but I landed in comedy sports because I'm like, this is where I feel like I get the most out of this entire experience.
yes,
But
yes.
then, seeing how to navigate through even through that was just such a different world. And I still think back to old behaviors and just like I am embarrassed beyond belief. Uh, and,
I
and all I can really do is just try to push forward with the things
Yeah,
that I'm doing now and not make amends or make up for it, but know that like where you can end up, which is why we can only push forward.
I had a like I'm on an anti-racism journey, and like I've committed to it, and I am I think anyone my age, and certainly anybody who's from where I'm from Eastern Kentucky. uh, I know that there were people of other races who were there when I was there, but I don't remember them because there was absolutely no integration socially. And I just don't see how, like, you can't not be racist. You cannot not have um, built-in
Preconceived
expectations
notions.
and beliefs and stuff. And the time that I come from too is just a different time. I uh, I learned the words to my old Kentucky home with a racist slur in it. Like, as a 5 year old, right? They taught it to the kindergarten classes. And then a couple years later, they're like, we're not going to say this word anymore. We're going to say a different word. And you didn't understand why. And there was no like reflection. I see my friends now with small children who have these really deep discussions very frankly and very way more often than my parents did. And I wonder, did my parents have these conversations with me and I just forgot it? Or did they never have these conversations with me? Or did they, like, how does it, but in any case, I'm on this anti-racist journey. And the first step is just to be really uncomfortable and understand that you can't be fragile. You have to be tough, and you have to be willing to own your past regressions, transgressions, and bring other people with you as much as you can. So that's how I think of it. I can't undo what any of the behaviors that I have already done, but what I do try and do is challenge people and be brave 30 seconds at a time when talking to people about things that are just like, I don't want a confrontation, but I have to be brave 30 seconds at a time and say this thing and then get through it. And those baby steps I are not enough, but I will take as many of them as needed in order to get to a place where future generations look back and can't believe that the 60s or the 70s or the 80s or whatever, they can't even believe it. Like, I want that for the next generations.
Let me ask you this: with all the changes that have been happening and upgrades, and all for the better, but
Yeah,
us
agreed.
being the old farts,
Right.
do you still feel like you're part of the company?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. There are times where I'm jolted into not feeling it. Like, I used to feel like I really had my finger on the pulse, and it turns out I didn't at all. Like, I would hear somebody say something and be like, "Oh no!" Like, I'm not. I don't know. Or somebody will ask me like, another old fart will be like, "Do you know what this thing is that people are talking about?" And I'll be like, "No, I don't. What is it?" Um, I do feel like I'm part of the company, and I feel like part of that is me making younger players feel like part of the company. Like, that's, if I wasn't doing that, I don't think I would feel like part of the company. Like, I have to. It's, to me, it's really, this is my social circle. This is my, very much my social circle. The people who I hang out with who don't play comedy sports did play comedy sports at one point. Like, I can count on one hand the number of close friends I have that never played at comedy sports. This is where I have made my deep and lasting and enduring friendships. And I want it to feel like that for everybody else too. I feel like responsible for it being good, even though frankly, like, this is one of the things that I struggle with sometimes as an older player, is that I this is gonna sound so awful, Luis, but I don't get credit for all the blood I left on the field as a younger player, right? I mean, like, there were, whoever the workhorse is at comedy sports right now, that was me, for like 8 or 9 years.
Yep.
I really, really worked hard at having this, and having people be like, "Oh, well, she's not around very much," or, "Oh, she's like I have put in my time. I have put in so much. I've put in so much time, effort, money, actual blood, tears. Like, this place is really, I it's in my heart. It's in me." And for people to be like, "Oh, she's like kind of this emeritus player," that doesn't feel real to me. I don't feel like an emeritus player because I understand what my um, legacy is that other people can't see. Um, but I
No,
also,
no, that doesn't sound awful. I myself have done my fair share of work throughout the years, and like many of us, a lot of it was free. Uh,
yeah, oh yeah,
you think back to the actual, like, how much time and sweat, blood, and tears you've given to this sort of thing, and it never feels like you owe me anything, because I don't feel
right.
like I'm owed. But
I want to feel valued for it though.
yes,
I
yeah.
want it to have value.
I mean, I can tell you
Yeah,
even now, the position that I have, this D&I position, like, because of the subject matters, and because of sort of conversations I have to have, and the weight that all this carries, like, it has never been more noticeable to me how much of myself, like, emotionally and mentally and everything, I've been giving, especially since we went into lockdown. I,
right.
and it's just like,
Yeah, no,
I don't feel like I'm owed
what's the value
anything,
in?
but
No,
yeah,
I would have done it. I would have done it if
I
no
would
one
do it
ever
again.
valued me. But because you and I are those people who are like, I want to do it until I feel good. But man, when somebody values you for it, it's everything, It really is.
You never feel more empowered to do more than when
And
you
that
see
is
that
how
what
comedy sports has made me feel more than any other improv theater. It made me feel valued to the point where I took initiative to really put some blood, sweat, and tears into it. And
it's good to know there's some, but like anything else, we could always be doing so much more.
right,
Um,
well, and I think it's important. Like it was important to me when I saw an opportunity to run the Kickstarter earlier this year, the Indiegogo. It was important to me to do that because I don't think I can't do nothing and still say value me, right? Like I feel like there has to be some renewal of it over time. I can't do what I used to do certainly, but I saw this thing that I knew how to do and I knew I could own it and I knew I could make it work. Like that was important to me to do. Um,
right, and there's a lot of different ways that I think we need to move towards being able to not just honor people's work, but you get into things like compensation, which is also something that at some point needs to become a thing.
mhm.
But I
It
think
will.
and it will. But I think for me, with this position, I think I've run into some people along the way that are like, you should really make sure that they blankety blank blank blank. And I guess I feel a little insulted with that stuff because I'm like, the in my head I kind of go, I'm not like a first year freshman who's getting taken advantage of here. Like I've had decades to think about this, and I'm okay with this, with giving this time. I don't disagree with you that there should be these things in place. That's kind of what I'm working towards.
Right.
But I guess I always felt like those people were trying to make me feel bad for doing that, and I'm like, this isn't a taking advantage of me situation. Like
Right.
I'm giving this because of the experience that I have, and I know what I can bring to this.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And
I get what you're saying.
so Louise,
Well,
if I may, I just want to take a second and just say that what you're doing is extraordinary when you have my perspective because I understand what it was like when 20 years ago and the commitment that comedy sports has made to diversity and inclusion has made me so proud of the work that everyone who's working on it is doing and to I mean so I just want to say that as somebody who has been through many seasons of comedy sports, this is this current season is one of my very favorites. I
I
really
can
love
tell you that I would not have continued with this job. There's been several times where I was ready to jump ship.
it.
I would not have continued if I didn't feel like it wasn't making me a better person,
Yes.
pulling me back up from the shitty places that I let myself get to, and
Bringing other people along.
seeing like what it's
Yes.
doing for me. And that's what makes me go, I gotta keep doing this, because if it's doing this for me, like
Right.
a shithead in his
Yeah.
20s, then it can do so much for someone who's a better person than me.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah, we
agree.
are we are coming towards the end of our time,
Yes, I know.
believe it or not. So final thoughts, things you would like to leave people with. We'll definitely have you back, and we'll discuss a lot of this stuff in further detail. But for now, a final thought.
A final thought is do you know what the thing is that is I think a lot of people don't know about an older player or maybe an older woman player is the that everything hurts all the time physically. All your joints are breaking down. All of you constantly have headaches, your eyesight's going, your hearing is going, oh, don't even get me started on menopause. I mean, just
I won't.
thank you. Um, that I the so as there is when I'm playing comedy sports, that is the one thing that is like if I were like, I need to tell you about like my experience as an older woman playing comedy sports is it, it's not easy at all. Jumping, running, like all of these things. And you have to like here's a piece of advice. Everybody start working out now and build muscle. Don't just run. Don't do things that break your joints down. Like build up your muscles to wrap around your joints and do because it is just really hard to play comedy sports. It's easier on Zoom.
Oh yeah, because you get to
But yeah.
stand for a good chunk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, it's great. This is great. I can play as much as I want, but
I
like I
mean,
really
I'm about to hit my 40s, and I've definitely slowed down. And
it's
so, like,
start working out now, my friend. I'm
I am,
serious.
I am. Don't worry about that.
Squats, all the squats in the world. So that is one thing that I wanted to like. If I was like, oh, if I'm going to talk about my experience, that is front of mind constantly. When I had shingles a couple of years ago, and now I have
Me
nerve.
too.
Yes, I have my elbows are constantly on fire. I'm like,
I have a scar somewhere on my forehead from getting face shingles. I couldn't even get shingles in the right place. I got it on my face. It's
Jesus.
supposed to be like across your chest or something.
Mine was like in my elbow. It went up, and I thought it
Nope,
was
mine decided to just right here, like that Ziggy Stardust album, just right here.
trace through wherever you have a nerve. Like you can trace your nerves, like pathways, neural pathways. But yeah, I mean, like, so that is like just be kind and do those check-ins, like consent check-ins, and about your physical health. That's the one thing that like every once in a while I'm like, ugh, I don't know if I can do it tonight. And that never happened before a couple years ago. And it's really an interesting development. But other than that, I would just like to say that I or reiterate that I'm just really proud of comedy sports and having come from where I came from, and understanding what all the old paradigms are and what I see now is really it's genuinely it's 180 degrees. So
It's nice to
well
see.
played, yeah, to everyone involved.
It's nice to see that we're setting a stage to be around for another 30 plus years.
That's exciting too. I think about like I'm a business person, so I like thinking strategy all the time, and I'm like, oh, what would I do if I owned comedy sports? Like, I can see so many new interesting paths for the company now, and I'm really excited to
It
see
makes
what
it feel like we're gonna leave a good place for other people at some point.
I think so too, but not for a long time. I will play
Not
until they
for a
drag me out
very
of
long
the
time.
TV.
All right, Kat, thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. Please check out our website, our Twitter, our Instagram, our Facebook. We're on Twitch, CSZ Network. Please find us. We're performing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sundays. We have new programming coming in February. If you are watching this in February, we have new programming now. So please check us out. And we will see you at the very next one. DNI Talks. Thank you all so much.